Okay, we are on to week 2 in our $1,000 sports betting challenge. So last week we were pretty successful. Now y'all know I'm going to go through and every single week I'm going to give you my over-unders. I'm going to also go through and give you my favorite player props. Now I'm going to say, whenever we're using that $1,000 bankroll and seeing exactly how high we can get that by the end of the season, I'm probably not going to be betting many over-unders because, to be completely honest, while it's fun to go out there, it's fun to talk over-unders, maybe put some bets down and just try to get some more enjoyment out of these games. I think if you're looking at Vegas lines, I'm going to have a very hard time being profitable with over-unders. Whereas I think with these player props that we are going to discuss today, there are some lines that I'm looking at that I am just extremely excited to go through and bet. I mean, there's one line in particular that I think is the lock of the week. But of course, before we get to the actual bets, make sure y'all go sign up for Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK. When you sign up for Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, you have access to all these player props as well. I think the only states they don't allow it in are like Nevada because Las Vegas, Washington State, and like Louisiana. It's pretty much allowed everywhere. And to go along with this, when you make that $10 deposit with Underdog Fantasy, they are doubling that money to $20. And of course, it goes through and supports the channel in a massive way. And you also get entered in every single day. We are doing drawings for these Fantasy Flock Network hats. A little warning. I mean, you're probably going to look too good when you wear these. They're probably too good looking, but beyond that, beyond putting your life in possible threat from just the female attention that you will be getting, really, there's no reason not to go through and use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. So let's go through, let's pull this up, show y'all exactly what we did last week so we can be keeping track and just making ourselves accountable. And hopefully we don't run out of this $1,000. Hopefully we can spin it up to a pretty big number. So yeah, here were the picks last week, and I have no idea why they ended up not showing as green or whatever. So let me actually close this out. That way I can give y'all a better look at it. That way y'all don't necessarily have to be trying to figure that out on your own. You can see exactly how much we made if I just get a new screenshot for y'all. So I apologize for that, but this is going to be the result of last week. I'm sure that you can also go pull up the video from last week as well, of course. But let's switch this back over here. We'll slide this over so you can see that last week we essentially washed these out. This is minus 60 plus 60. And then we essentially made $80 on our bets last week. So we did not bet 1,000 last week. Don't know exactly how much we're going to bet this week. However, there's one bet that I really am excited about, and this is going to be Tim Patrick's under. And so if we go through, you pull up Tim Patrick's under, while yes, it is a great matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Scrolling down. I hate to give away my lock of the week so early on, but to see that Tim Patrick right now, they have his over under at 4.5 receptions. This is ridiculous for me. If we go pull up his 2020 game log, keep in mind, this is a season where, yes, you had Courtland Sutton out the entire year. Also, KJ Hamler was a rookie. Also, Noah Fant was only in year 2. And here you actually have, now I know the injury to Jerry Jeudy, but still, I think the situation Tim Patrick is in this season is significantly worse than what he's been in previous years. And you have the receptions. I'm going to go through weekly and tell you what they are. 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 0, 5, 4, 4, 3, 4, 6, 4, 2, 4. So last season, he went over 4.5 receptions twice in what I perceive to be a better situation than he is currently in. So we are going to be betting this under in almost every single bet. So how we're strategizing when we're going through these bets is we are trying to build in correlation into our starting lineup. So if we're going to be betting Trevor Lawrence here, if we're going to bet the under on Lawrence, we know that's going to be more likely that these wide receivers here also hit their unders. So I know nobody ever likes to see me take under bets, but usually those are where the profit margins lie. So let's take some unders here. We're going to be betting that this Broncos game isn't as high scoring as most people expect it to be. So we're going to take the under on Tim Patrick receptions. We're also going to go through, take the under on Trevor Lawrence, his fantasy points at essentially 17, and the under on Marvin Jones receiving yards. I mean, with the receiving yards here, I think it's going to be very hard for Marvin Jones to be able to repeat what he did this past week. And at the same time, I mean, I'm just looking at it going, well, how are you projecting him to be the leading wide receiver out of this Jacksonville core? So we're going to be making this a pretty strong bet, to be honest. Let's go up here. And all the bets we did last week, we were doing them in $20 increments. I'm confident enough with this bet right here that I think we'll be willing to bump that up to $40 to win $240. So yes, we have to hit the 3-player parlay, but I mean, I think there's a decent amount of upside there. So let's confirm that bet. This is going to be that bet slip on that one. Okay, so now let's go through and let's try to find another game that we could be attacking. We were looking at all these lines for Cincinnati and Chicago, and I think that they're honestly priced pretty efficiently. So if we're moving down a little further, Tyrod Taylor, we talked about this earlier this week, where we were looking at that Tyrod Taylor 249 total yards line. And I'll say here, with him to get to 249 total yards, I think it's a lot more reasonable when you're talking about total yards rather than him being able to do that through just passing alone. However, I still think this could be potentially a spot that we want to be taking the under. I mean, you can see that I actually dropped a little heart on the Brandon Cooks line because this is something that also stood out to me right away when we pulled this game up. So if we're looking at the rest of this, I mean, I'm going to be very reluctant to go and make a bet on the under with either Jarvis Landry or Austin Hooper, given that they are missing Odell Beckham Jr. this week. So it's not great to not be able to pick the other side of this game. That's going to be something we're looking to do consistently with one of these receiving options. However, I think the Baker Mayfield 20 fantasy points is very aggressive. So we're going to go and we're going to take the under on Baker Mayfield at the same time. So I'm not as confident with this one as we were with the previous. We'll go $30 on this one, and because I want to be able to get 5 or 6 of these bets in. So let's submit that ticket in there. That's 30 to win 180. And now let's go a little bit further down, trying to find our next call. So I really do like to make the bet on Matthew Stafford this week against Indianapolis, making the assumption that you will have this Los Angeles Rams game a little closer where they're actually having to lean on the pass slightly more. And if that's going to be the case, I think the over on Matthew Stafford would be very appealing. But the problem is none of these other lines with Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Tyler Higbee, I'm not excited about. So maybe we can circle our way back to this game a little later on, but let's try to shop for some better prices. And one that we see right here is a clear call for me, taking the under on Devin Singletary. I think this Devin Singletary line is ridiculous now that it seems like Zach Moss may be good to go this week. So the under on Devin Singletary, I feel is going to be very profitable here. If we're moving down a little bit further to try to find some correlation, it's not going to be as easy when we have this running back, because hitting the under on Devin Singletary, it doesn't speak to that much with what we would find with either Josh Allen or Stephon Diggs, to be honest. So I think we are just going to be ignoring getting the correlation in here, even though that's usually something we're trying to do when we're creating all these parlays. I just think that this line is bad enough where we can try to find that correlation on a different bet. Now going through and looking to try to find something else. Honestly, these Patriots lines, they seem fine to me. The Dolphins lines, we would have been taking the under on Waddle here if Will Fuller was playing, but with Will Fuller out, I think that Waddle line is completely fine. Elijah Mitchell for 60.5 rushing yards. I mean, I think that if that was total yards, we'd be a little more willing to take the over, but with it being rushing and rushing alone, I think it's going to be a difficult spot for Elijah Mitchell to hit. Before we take it though, let's go through, let's see if we can find anything else that we maybe slightly prefer. So Jalen Reagor, 3.5 receptions. He had 6 targets this past week. Kenyon Drake's over. I think Kenyon Drake's over would be very appealing. Love Kenyon Drake for fantasy football purposes this week, mainly because you're looking at him as someone that's going to be able to get a considerable amount of targets out of the backfield, and I think those receptions will add up in a PPR format. Now moving down. Okay, I think this is another great spot to choose. Going with the under on Deontay Johnson here with 69.5 receiving yards. Now, I mean, just with Deontay, I know he had 10 targets this past week, but I think the target volume is going to go down with how horribly inefficient that he has been. Now, the issue when we're going to take the under on Deontay Johnson is if we're looking at Ben Roethlisberger's points here, we were trying to build in that correlation. So as soon as I take the under on one of these wide receivers, the next thing I'm going to be looking to do is possibly taking the under on the quarterback in that same situation. Ben Roethlisberger, I'm kind of fine with that point total there. Maybe we just make a bet that this Steelers team is going to be a little more run heavy if they can get a strong lead against the Las Vegas Raiders. So this Ben Roethlisberger line, I'm honestly fine with this line, but since we're structuring our bet in the way where we're expecting Deontay Johnson hit the under, I think that it's just going to be plus EV. If we think this is a good bet, we should most likely be taking under on Ben Roethlisberger as well. So let's slide this up, and here we are going to be making, let's call it a $30 bet. So this is going to total 100 so far on the video. We're going to make a couple more than this though, because there are some other lines that I want to be attacking a little further down. So let's go a little further down to look at just those. I know some people in the comment section were really wanting me to go and try to hammer some of these Tampa Bay lines, but to be honest, I'm a little worried that maybe they're looking at something that I don't see. I'm a little worried that you're looking at Tampa and they're going, okay, well, maybe they get some more utilization in just using one wide receiver instead of spreading it out so much. And if that's the case, it's going to be hard for us to take multiple players in this instance. Now, if we're scrolling to the bottom, I think one game that I possibly want to be attacking is going to be the Tennessee Titans game, where you have Ryan Tannehill, in my opinion, as a clear bounce back candidate. I think what we can do is we can maybe build in an overall bet with this team to take the over on Tannehill, AJ Brown. And I think from here, we could either go one of two ways. We could look at the side that we are going to have with the Seattle Seahawks and Chris Carson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and assume that if they're going to go over here, then this game's going to be competitive and you could be expecting the overs to hit on the Seattle side at the same time. Now, if you're looking at Tyler Lockett and his 5.5 receptions, obviously Lockett in fantasy football purposes is very valuable based on the efficiency that he has with his overall target volume. But if you're looking at the game log for Tyler Lockett, not target volume, target efficiency. He's just going through and having a ridiculous yards per target season to season. If we're looking at 5.5 receptions, to see how many weeks he went over 5.5 receptions last year, honestly, it looks pretty balanced. We're looking at this game log and it looks like it was essentially half and half. I think that what I would probably prefer to do is just to change this bet overall and possibly go with the over on DK Metcalf receiving yards, assuming that this game could potentially be a spot where it turns into a shootout, which would make these bets more likely to hit. So let's take the over on Tannehill, the over on Brown, and the over on DK Metcalf. Slide that up here. We're going to be making this a $20 bet and don't really like taking overs. I think the majority of bets that we're going to be making these weeks, we're going to take the under, because obviously if a player leaves through halfway through the first quarter, then you're going to be hating yourself when you took the over, and you don't have to be worried about that when you're taking the under. So it's a 50-50 split. We were going to prefer to take the unders there. And I think usually the public goes a little too heavy on the overs, to be honest. Now, going through and looking at the rest of these games, I think intriguing lines here would include Ezekiel Elliott, 77.5 rushing and receiving yards. Honestly, I want to say this is close to a damn block. I know that Zeke had a very poor performance this past week, but you also have to remember that Ezekiel Elliott went up against the toughest run defense in football. So we're going to take the over on Ezekiel Elliott here. And if we're going to take the over on Ezekiel Elliott, I think that it's hard to build in correlation throughout the rest of the game. Maybe I'm not necessarily thinking about it in the right light. I think instead we just like the Ezekiel Elliott line. So we're going to go back to the other locks of the week that we had and bet them. Even if there is no correlation here, we're going to bet the under on Tim Patrick receptions. We're going to be betting the under on Devin Singletary, 68.5 rushing and receiving yards. You're looking at the difference in a line here. They're expecting that Devin Singletary will have 8 less yards than Ezekiel Elliott this week. I think that's a spot that we can definitely take advantage of. Honestly, I like these lines so much that are we willing to throw $50 on this bet? You're looking at it and saying that if we're throwing $50, we are going to be getting a 6x payout. So we would be looking at $300 in return. And these are my favorite lines of the week. While yes, there's no correlation and we're always trying to get the correlation into our parlays, maybe this is just me being a complete fish. Maybe this is me not necessarily thinking about this fully, but I think this is going to be our play here. I think if we're going to go with the big bet this week, let's go $50 on Zeke, Patrick, Devin Singletary. This is going to lead us to, I think, $170 total in bets so far. Let's get one more. Let's hit $200 in bets so far. Maybe my math is a little off, but I mean, of course, Underdog has that history right there. So I'll have the ticket slip to show y'all in next update we do, regardless of what the exact amount we spent was. So if we go through and look at this, I think Marquez Callaway, the over on 3.5 receptions here is possibly intriguing in that you're looking at Marquez Callaway, and he played a ridiculous amount of snaps this past week. So if we're looking at Callaway wanting to take the over on 3.5 receptions, it would be nearly impossible for me to take the over on Jameis Winston for 2 passing touchdowns here. So I think that's possibly going to be a stay away if we're not going to be able to build in that correlation. One last thing that we can do is just to continue to hammer in this Tim Patrick line. This Tim Patrick line is horrendous. So let's go the under on Patrick. And of course, if the under on Patrick hits, it's going to make it a lot more likely that the under on Teddy Bridgewater does at the same time. And then we'll go and we'll just throw this in with our other favorite bet of the week. So we're going to have a lot of money fading both Tim Patrick and Devin Singletary this week. Let's hope that Zach Moss is active. Of course, if you're watching this as a stream, if you're going to be wanting to go and make some of these bets yourself, maybe you wait until Sunday morning to see exactly if Zach Moss is active or not. Then you can go and slam this Devin Singletary line. I don't necessarily have that luxury because we need to get this stream out on Saturday at the very latest. I probably should have got this out for y'all a couple days ago, but it doesn't matter. I mean, y'all still have the potential to go and chase these lines. Make sure y'all use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. You can find the link in the description of the video. So let's go take that under here. And I think that maybe the last bet that we are going to make. So let's go. And honestly, I really like these numbers. Taking the under on 19 fantasy points for Teddy Bridgewater. I know it's a great matchup against Jacksonville. We're going to go with another $30 on that one. Okay. I'm excited to show y'all what the results of these bets are going to be next week. Maybe I'm coming out here and just hanging my head low if Devin Singletary and Tim Patrick have a big game. But I mean, if they both just underperform like we're expecting, then I think there's going to be a ton of room for profit here. So of course, if you hit on anything big, please send me a screenshot anywhere. I'd love to see it. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop that like, and leave a comment letting me know any picks that you have made so far this week or any picks that you think look the best. And lastly, if you want to support the channel, if you want to make sure that I still can go through and make bets like this, make sure you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all, and have a great day.